Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr, and boy, do we have a fun episode today. There's so many different silos or compartments that we deal with in our lives, and we need to find balance in all of those. We're juggling all these glass balls, and we don't want any of them to fall. And we're going to talk about balance today. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Nick Jonsson. He's a best-selling author of the book Loneliness: The 5 Pathways to Overcoming Isolation, Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in the Modern Business World. He's an inspirational keynote speaker, a podcast host, and not to mention a top 1% world age group triathlon athlete. That's where he's going to really talk our language, which I'm excited about. As a co-author and the managing director of the Executives Global Network in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, he leads Southeast Asia's largest confidential peer network. Nick, thanks for joining us. We're very excited to help you coach us to balancing all these glass balls we're juggling.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today and indeed tackling this very, very difficult question, which I'm sure is on most listeners' mind.
I think as we roll out here and get the conversation going, we'll recognize that the triathletes and trail runners and any of these people involved in their sport, there's going to be a lot of similarities between us. I think we have similar struggles. And what are the patterns that you see? What are the types of struggles that you see with athletes that are trying to perform well and accomplish great things and also keep the rest of their life going?
The major challenge I see is that we believe perhaps that we have the answers ourselves. When it comes to asking for help, we seem to be very shy. We seem to hold on to our challenges ourselves. We want to solve it ourselves. Maybe we don't want to be a burden to someone else, or we don't want to appear weak. So we seem to have the answers. So perhaps when we're out there running on the trail with our friends, we have a great time, but we could also perhaps talk about some of the challenges we have and ask for support for that.
I know one of the things that is a common statement is what's said on the trail stays on the trail. And we have confidence in one another to keep that commitment, not to spread word out there. Is there a similar saying on the triathlete field? Do you say what happens in the pool stays in the pool? Or
In triathlon, unfortunately, we don't have that saying, and quite a lot of the sport is by yourself as well, especially when you swim, you cannot talk at all. And on the cycling also, you normally cycle on perhaps one lane because it's dangerous to go side by side sometimes. On the run, you're going too fast or being too tired because it's the last sport if you have a triathlon. So we need to get more on the trail. I think that's one thing here, but it's great that you have more talking on the trail.
Hey, Nick, you have written a book about this kind of balance. Boy, it seems like you may have had some experience with unbalanced things in your life. Can you talk about that? How did this all come to a head?
Yeah, and it all started in the workplace, and I'm sure that many of the listeners as well have a job outside of the trail running. And inside the workplace then, while I had a perfect career, you could say, I was really, getting promoted. I was on a roll. I got the pay increases and so on that perhaps we all want in the workplace. But once I found myself in the position that I was striving for, I found myself very lonely. I found myself isolated, and I was asking, what is going on here? And at this time, I was still a triathlete and doing a lot of running and living in Indonesia, beautiful trail running as well, which I did. And that's where I found my happiness. It was in the sport, it was outside of the workplace. And I was really questioning myself and my life. Is this what it's all about? And with that, at that time, I had a bit of a self-crisis, and I traded my healthy diet to fast food, and I stopped basically exercising. Instead, I went to socializing in the bar after work, drinking some more beer instead, with that putting on weight, and before I knew it, I lost all my good habits.
Wow.
Do you see this as is not uncommon? Or, I mean, you wrote the book. You said, you know what? I worked through this problem because I can obviously see that the outcome was good. You look like you're in great shape, and you've got a message to share. What inspired you to write that book? Do you feel this was a common problem that you recognize that you could help people with?
Yeah, certainly. So when I was going through that challenging patch, again, I didn't talk to anyone about my deep struggle. I didn't share it with anybody. I was trying to grind through and sorting it out myself. And I made a series of bad decisions then, including resigning from the job, divorcing my wife, and I just didn't get back on track until I hit my rock bottom. And it was only from there I could rebuild my life and come back again and live happily. But what shocked me at this juncture was, because I wanted to look into it, I was then surveying other executives who were working to find out about their feelings and thoughts and their balance in life and so on. And I was quite shocked with the findings I had. And that triggered me to want to go ahead and look further into it and writing the book.
So, Nick, you're at rock bottom, and a lot of us, if we're having a struggle, whether it's professionally or personally with relationships, we look to that trail or the swim or the bike or whatever as an escape to forget, or to give us that time to work things out in our head. And instead of, I guess we think we can fix the things that are going wrong, if they are going wrong in business or personal, with going and doing the exercise, getting out and being active, and that's where we deal with it. But you're telling us that there's more to it than that. We actually have to somehow get it out. We have to share what's going on with our lives. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think it's great to get out and go for a run to deal with things. But sometimes we don't have all the answers ourselves. Sometimes we need some help. We might need a coach or a mentor, someone to be there to support us, to give us that guidance to make some decisions as well, rather than making this decision by ourselves. There might be someone who's been there before who can guide us. And that is where the issues are. I resigned from my job without consulting someone. I didn't talk to someone about it, and it was quite ridiculous, that decision. I should have gotten some support, perhaps getting some confidence to go and have a conversation with my boss and talk about it without just resigning. So that's just one example, and I believe many of us are going through this and doing the decisions by ourselves, perhaps when we are in good shape, in good spirits after a run, but maybe it's not the right decision.
What? Go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say, so Nick, you learned your lesson maybe the wrong way, by doing the wrong things. How did you figure out the right way? And how did you come up with writing the book that we're going to discuss here in a minute, that are going to help us to know what we need to do if we're going through some situations?
Yeah, so a year into writing my book, I was back in good shape again. I was competing in long distance triathlons, and I felt I had it. I realized I went through a difficult patch. I got it now, but I had not shared it with too many people. I shared it in my close little circle and so on. But then that 1 year into my recovery, can we say, something happened, something that changed my life forever again. A good friend of mine who had just been to Mount Everest, he had hiked up to base camp. He was in great shape. He looked like someone who had it all. He posted on social media that he'd never been happier. He had a great relationship, good career going for him. And I was going to do an event with him in Singapore. We had a rehearsal and he didn't show up. We thought it was strange. We went ahead with the rehearsal anyway. After that, I checked my phone and I had all these messages. And this gentleman, whose name was Simon, has died of suicide. And that, boom, was an episode again. I wanted to look into it. And here I am writing a book about isolation, loneliness. And I call his brother. I called his family to find out what's going on. No one had any idea what's going on. And that is the day when I decided to really start talking about it. So that's when I picked up my mobile phone, put it on a video, and I made a video that I posted on social media, and I wanted to start to break the stigma in discussing all these issues of isolation. And I set up a fund and to raise both money and awareness for this cause. And that basically propelled my book to the next level at this stage and the conversation around it.
And then I have a question. I love how Scott started this and talked about glass balls that he's juggling. And I like how he keeps some of these secrets, some of his intros and his things, because they're a pleasant surprise when he paints the picture for us. And I see one of that fourth ball perhaps being our endurance sport, the thing that we chose, whatever it is, running or doing triathlete events. And do you see that fourth ball as being problematic, or do you think it can be helpful? Is there a way to seek balance in a way that's productive and not hurtful?
I believe that our endurance sport can be either a good or an evil.
Yes.
If we have our life in shape, and the way I see it these days is that I'm working with my coaches. If I have some business challenges, I'm working with mentors and sponsors, people who's been there before, seeking their guidance for the challenges I have. Then they are challenging me back to come up with suggestions and solutions. I go out for a trail run or go for a bike ride, then the answers will clear to me. When I come back for them, I have a coffee with them or a call with them. I say, yeah, thank you. I've been going through this. I've been thinking. I believe this is the way we should do it. So I think then it can be a good.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. There was a pause.
I was going to say, and it can be an evil if we feel, and I used sport like this before I lost my good habits and picked up the drinks instead. I would use it as an escape. I would be challenged and stressed at work. I would rush away from the office, putting on the running shoes, going for a run, perhaps go a bit faster running than I like, forget about everything, feeling great about it. But then the problems are still there the next day. And here comes the thing. Then you're basically using it as an addiction, as an escape, which is doing you no good.
Yeah, that fourth ball can either be cumbersome and a problem, but the word that came to my mind as you were giving that explanation was moderation. You know, if you obsess with it, it can take over your life. If you have in the right quantity, it can be beneficial. Like you found that you had coaches gave you some things to think about. You went to an environment where you could process it, and you'd come back and 2x or 3x. You were able to work faster because your mind is focused on one thing in silence, and that's the place that you're productive. How many times have all of us gone out on the trail? We'll use that as an example, and problems just start to be solved because a lot of the other stuff that you're carrying around kind of lifts off. And you can solve things. And Scott and I, you and I have solved a lot of problems, at least if we can remember them when we get back.
Yeah, world hunger would not be a problem if we could write things down while we were solving it. I want to change the metaphor of the glass balls because as Nick was talking and you were talking, Don, I think I'm going to change the metaphor. You've probably seen the jugglers, the really good jugglers, where instead of juggling some glass balls that are all the same size and weight, you see a guy that's juggling a tennis ball, a bowling ball, a chainsaw, and a tennis racket. Right? They're different sizes, they're different weights, and I think that as I'm hearing you guys speak, I'm thinking that may be the problem. If we're focused too much on one area of our life and neglecting the other areas of our life, I think we can get into trouble. We want to try to make those glass balls all the same size or proportional to where we are in our lives. Nick, what do you think about the metaphor change?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with it. And I think it's very essential that we can balance our lives. And I also talk a lot with leaders about self-leadership, and we all heard the saying, if we go on an airplane, that we have to put on our mask first before we help others. And isn't that true? We have to look after ourselves first, and especially if many of the trail runners, I'm sure, are also competitive in the career. They have senior jobs, they want to get the promotion, they want to reach the top and getting the bonuses that comes with it. It's so easy to then fall into that it's your boss or your colleagues that are planning your calendar. They pack your calendar with meetings, events. You're working, perhaps managing different time zones. Therefore, you're stretching your day. There's nothing left for yourself. So when we talk about balancing these different balls, then indeed it's about making sure that you block time for yourself first, and for your self-care, and for your trail run, of course.
So sometimes there are different seasons in life where you need to really focus on one area because the door is open, it will close later. Can you speak to the fact that you have to recognize what phase of life you're in and when you should maybe have one ball a little bit heavier than the other?
Yes, absolutely. And this all comes down to being vulnerable, according to me. It's about knowing yourself and being honest to yourself and the ones around you, having honest conversations with them about this. And if you're open and you're talking, you have good relationships with your spouse, with your close friends, and with your colleagues and your boss, then people will understand if you explain it. But again, if you're trying to do it all by yourself, and then suddenly you don't show up in one area of our life, because we'll always fall short somewhere. It's just like that in life, and it's about communicating this. And this is what I do these days with my wife. I'm now remarried. It's my second go at this, and I'm communicating. I'm saying I'm going through a lot of work now. There will be a little bit extra work now, so I'm sorry, during these next 3 weeks we won't have as much time for our time together. But this too will pass. Why don't we block something in a month? I have a gap. Why don't we do a weekend away then to make up for it? If you communicate like that, people will appreciate it, and you will also remove then the pressure and the stress that you are falling short during this time.
That is a brilliant golden nugget. I'm writing that down because I think communication is the key. And as you were talking about that, I think it works in the other areas of your life. The managers that I've had in the past know that I am a runner, and I've talked to them about my schedule and said, you know what, I'm a better employee. I do my job way better when I get to have that morning run. And sometimes that morning run may creep into the work hours a little bit, but I guarantee you I'm going to make it up. I'm not going to be staring at my computer for 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do in the morning. When I get to work, man, I have all the answers. I have my day planned because I've been thinking about it without looking at my phone, and I think that that's important. I was going to say, when you mentioned, Nick, when you've been very successful professionally, and you have people filling your calendar with urgent items, and you're getting emails, and they're everything all of a sudden is a priority, and everything's important. How do you prioritize your day with not only work and all of those bombarding, but the other areas of your life? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, Scott, and let me answer that by first responding to what you said there, because I love what you said, that you're more productive if you go for your run and then everything else falls in place. I put it like this, and especially imagine if you're a senior leader, for example, and I say that you are working inside your business when you're sitting in front of your computer. You are the administrator, you are in meetings, you're sending emails, you're responding to all of that. When you are in that state, there's no way you can do a leader. You're actually a manager, an administrator. When you're out on the trail run, or you go out for a bike ride, that's when you lift yourself. You're the leader. You have the CEO mindset, the strategic mindset, and that's when things clear. Just like you say, that's when the answers come. And that's what I've explained to people around me and to my whole teams. Yeah, the teams I'm running, I say, if you go out for healthy exercise and so on, that can be part of your workday, because you're always going to be on a late calls here and there anyway. So that's your CEO time. Enjoy that. So I think if we can create this culture also around us, then we are encouraging ourselves and others also to look after ourselves in that way. So that's the first
Good
part.
point. Yeah.
And that starts with each one of us giving ourselves permission to use that time in that way and not feel guilty and not feel like I'm supposed to be, in the grind doing it, and the bell goes and I should be sitting there at my computer, answering and getting things done. But giving yourself that permission to do that and being okay with it and allow it to be productive. You can't go out there and feel guilty about it, because then that's not productive. You need to give yourself freedom to let your mind wander a bit and not worry about being out there, so you can solve those problems and become sharper.
Absolutely, Don. And again, it comes back to this communication. Again, if you're trying to do this for yourself, yeah, just going to sneak out for that run, no one will find out, then it's never going to work. And again, creating that culture of openness and communication, setting the boundaries, understanding for ourselves. And if you do it, then encourage others to do it. And I think, let's face it, if you look at the workplace, the most people will wish that they could do more exercise, and they wish that they could be out there running more. But perhaps it's the company culture that need to be shifted, and that's the responsibility of the leaders to empower our teams, if you are a business leader, to go out there and be healthy.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to come back to the question. We kind of ended up talking about that a little bit too much, but to Nick's, back to the original question. Being bombarded with everybody saying this is important. How do you prioritize?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things to this. One is to put boundaries around yourself, especially now it's in this globalized world where you could be definitely invited to meetings in all time zones all over the world. You'll be pulled into teams here and there. So you need to also, again, and it comes back to communication, having good conversations with your boss. What is my job scope? What is expected of me? And you need also to be able to say no when it's really too much, because maybe the person who delegate this to you don't even know what's on your desk. So again, it's really about communicating clearly and not just accepting everything because you want to please the boss. Then you're the one who's going to burn out and so on. So that's one part. And then it's really to get organized, really to use all these tools. There's so many great AI tools there these days, especially, that you can use to become more efficient. And then, of course, if you are a manager, a leader, then it's about empowering your team and delegate to them. And I would say, and then creating this culture where people are not scared to fail, having an open culture again, that, that we learn together. This is an experiment rather than being too bossy about it. That's a couple of tips there, Scott.
Oh, those are great. I'm going to bounce back to the number one that you said, the first tip: say no. How do you have the courage to say no, or help instill some courage for me to be able to say no and not feel guilty and feel good about my response?
Yeah, again, a no can be something that perhaps is not appreciated at the other end, and it's how you package it. If it's a no by just declining an invite without responding with an explanation or without having a conversation, then it could be going against you. Then people are going to wonder, who's this person who's not collaborating, who's not supporting this? So you need to be very mindful and saying no in the right way, and it is by communicating. We need to talk, and if you are in a physical workplace, do it then over a coffee break and just explain your side of it and try to understand the other party. So again, it comes back to communication and just try to understand what's going on at the other end and not just drive your own agenda, and try to be collaborative.
That's right on the money, Nick. I remember managing somebody, and I would come to them often and said, hey, I have this new project or this new task I need you to do. And it's really important that we get this done. And here's the timeline that it needs to get done in. And I've had a couple people say this to me, and I think it is brilliant because it brings back the communication and expectations. Rather than you saying, sure, I'll get it done, and then things falling or failing, a couple of people I've managed have said, okay, I can do that, but let me tell you what's going to fall off. Right now, I have these 4 priorities right now for work that I'm doing. And if you add a 5th, one of those has to come off, or one of them is not going to be achieved. So you need to help me prioritize. So let your manager or your better half, if you will, prioritize. If you have things going on at home in a personal relationship and they're adding more and more things, saying, okay, I can do that, but here's where I am. These are the priorities I think are important. You need to help me reprioritize. If you want me to do that, I can do it, but something else is going to have to come off the plate, if you will.
I love that, Scott. That's some great tips right there. And I think also if we have some managers or leaders listening, be very careful and think twice before you delegate someone perhaps who is new in their career, because they will do everything to please you. They will like to show that they are doing the job well. And don't be surprised if they be seeing they're working at midnight or working over the weekend, because maybe they said yes to multiple people and they just take on everything. And that's not what we want to do to our colleagues. So we need to also be very mindful and create that culture, as you said, Scott, and for the leaders then to check in from time to time. How are you doing? How's the workload? Do you need some help? Do you need someone to have a mentoring conversation with you to support you in managing your workload?
As you said that, it made me think about personal bandwidth. We can only do so much, and you keep spreading out too far. To Scott's point, I can't do 5 things well. I can do 4 things very well, but you add a 5th, you're going to dilute my ability, and I'm going to have substandard work going out in 5 different places because I didn't have the tools to say no and feel good about. So I think that is a golden nugget, as you say, Scott. He likes to use golden nuggets, Nick. That is a golden nugget to have that communication, Nick, and to explain what the plate has on it and what you can actually accomplish.
Yes.
I'm going to add something to that. We've been kind of focused on the business and the personal aspect, but let's flip the table and look over at our hobby, our sports, our endurance sports, right? Sometimes, and we're typically endurance athletes are more of a type A, they lean more towards that, and they always have to have a race on the calendar, or they always have to be working towards some goal. And sometimes you need to realize that maybe right now I just need to do some base training and some aerobic training and resting and building my machine instead of pushing. And I think that's a tough one, because typically in our sports that you participate in, Nick, and we participate in, they're solo endeavors. We're not necessarily working with someone else. And so how do you balance that? How do you balance your training and making sure that you're not doing too much there?
Well, Mother Earth is sorting out of it in most parts of the world, I believe, by having seasons. So the ocean will be too cold for us to swim, or there might be snow. So we do get out, in some off season. I was born in Sweden, so I also spent some time in Sweden. But you don't want to go out and cycle in some time of the year in Sweden, for example. So therefore, you tend to not have any races during the winter, and then during the spring it all gets started again. So in that sense, that looked after it. But otherwise, we need to indeed really be mindful, because also for me now, being born in Sweden, I spend the summers in Sweden. Now I live and work in Asia, so I actually have summer all year round. So I have to remind myself to take that off season. I have to plan for it, and that's what I do. I had my last race back in Sweden in August, and I haven't had a race since. I have a fun race coming up in Thailand, Phuket, in 2 weeks, but I don't have any race that is a big one until May next year. So I do take my off season. Even that doesn't mean I stop training, but I reduce the volume and the intensity.
Mother Nature is helping us out. I love that. Follow Mother Nature. Follow the seasons with your training. I really like that. Nick, so let's pretend like you're now coaching young Nick Jonsson. You're coaching yourself, looking back on when you were burning the candle at both ends and maybe not speaking with people around you, and you were feeling lonely in your career. What would you tell yourself? How would you coach yourself?
A great question, Scott. And I've been thinking about this as well. And if I go back to the point where I started to isolate, where I started to have those feelings, I've been thinking, and what happened then was that I was the business development manager, basically running hospitals and clinics and so on. And one part of the job that I did really well was the sales, the business development and so on. What I didn't do so well was all the admin, the spreadsheets, the Excels and everything behind the scene. I had a great relationship with my boss. She was the one who pulled me in for the second time working with her. But I didn't want her to know that I was not very comfortable doing the admin, the spreadsheets. And while I was doing so well in the sales and the business development side, I thought, let me just deal with this. I wish that I went and knocked her door back then and said, hey, I'm not so comfortable with this spreadsheet. Is there someone in the company who could help me with this? Or perhaps I can get a training, or can I get some support? If I would have done that, the year of hell that followed because I was covering up for this, trying to deal with it myself, would have been completely different, Scott.
Wow.
Nick, what have you seen when people have the courage to have that conversation, to knock on that door? What kind of outcome from that interaction? Very positive, or people make decisions that this person came and complained about something, or do they see it in a positive way? For those of us that might be thinking, I don't know, I don't want to be looked to be the weak one on the block. I don't want to show that I can't do it. So what has your experience shown?
Well, we're talking about vulnerability here, and it's actually
right.
That word vulnerability going to be part of my next book, which I'm writing now. So it's a timely question because I'm looking into this right now. And yeah, when it comes to vulnerability, and even if you look into the common dictionary, the Oxford Learners and so on, vulnerability is associated with weakness, being under attack, and so on. And that is what we think about when about being vulnerable. We see it as a weakness. That's our society. And what I learned is that we need to see it as our strength, because we will be surprised. Once we dare to open up to our leader and our boss, they will be almost surprised, because, wow, who's this honest person who's coming to asking for my guidance, for my help, who has a problem? They will love you for it. That's what I've seen. And we need to turn this around to make vulnerability a strength.
You know, you've lived all over the world and worked all over the world, and maybe speaking to vulnerability. Do you see that there's one country or area in the world that views it differently, or is there a place that embraces it and it speaks to what you just said? Come on in, let's talk about it.
I see that the Western world is more open and more talking. The Asian world is even more closed. And that's why, also being in this part of the world, I need to be a role model, and to break through the Asian work culture is even harder.
Interesting. You know, the vulnerability thing is kind of ironic, and I'm kind of painting a picture between a business vulnerability or a personal relationship vulnerability and what we do out on the trail. And you probably see this too in triathlons, Nick. We're very vulnerable out there on the trail. We're throwing up on the side of the trail. We're dropping our shorts down to our knees and taking a bio break on the trail. That's vulnerability. You would never ever do that in a normal situation. But when you're out there and your body is saying this needs to happen now, you don't care. You remove the vulnerability and you just get things done.
And maybe that's why we feel comfortable out there in our communities, because we're allowed to be vulnerable. We don't need to have a shield up, and so we feel comfortable there, and that drives us there each week when we go out, or day, or whenever we do.
Probably. Sorry, Nick. We're going to make this a Don and Scott podcast, but you've brought up a lot of good things. I was going to say the reason why we feel safe out there is maybe we know that everybody else has done it before, right? Yeah. And so when you're going to drop your shorts around your ankles and take care of business, you know that someone else that's going to run by the trail and not pay attention to you and just run by you and not say anything to you, you know that they've done it before. And so maybe we need to look at that as our managers or the people we're working with or the people we're in relationships with have been in the same situation that we have been in, that we're not weak, that we are human. How do you like that?
Absolutely. Don and Scott, you're onto something here. We need to bring the trail into the office. That's what we need to do.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
There's the title for your next book. Go ahead. We won't hold any copyrights on that.
Absolutely. No, but it's about humanize the workplace, and that is what it's about. And it starts by, and back to the word here, vulnerability. It's about being human in the office. When, as humans, we are not scared to ask for help. We are not scared to go into your boss and knock their door when we have some problems with a spreadsheet to ask for help. We're not covering up for that. We become, so when we gotta go, basically.
No, I like your point, Nick. You know, if we're out on the trail or wherever we might be, we don't have any problem with saying, "Hey, I've got this pain in my knee or my shin or my foot," and asking for help. I mean, that's a common. We lean on each other to find answers and solutions, but we cover up at work. We build that facade around us that I'm the know-all. I'm the person I can't show weakness because maybe I won't get the next promotion, or maybe the guy coming up behind will see me that I'm not as sharp as I perceive to be. So I think at least out in our recreational community, we have a little more courage.
Absolutely. And I also want to look back at society in this, because I remember when I came into university in the 90s, when I studied in Australia, the dean of the business school on the first day, he gave an intro speech, and he said, you know, here at this university, you know, we want to be ranked among the best universities. We give scholarships if you perform well. We have awards if you top the classes. He was building up this picture, and he said, he then compared it with a football game, and he said, the winner is the winner, number two is the first loser. He said, I want you guys to drive. I want you to strive in this university. And then when we have that mentality that we're trying to top classes, getting scholarships, and if we bring that mentality into the workplace, and that's what I did. It was too much about me getting the promotions, me getting the bonuses, me doing everything I could to look great and getting everything for myself. And therefore, you know, you're elbowing your way to the top, and that's why I felt isolated. So there's something wrong here in at least the way I grew my career, and that made me isolated.
Oh, I think we need to dig into the word isolation, but I got one more on vulnerability, and we talked about it in business and personal relationships. And just so you know, Scott, this is for Nick. Okay, you can't jump in on this. So what about vulnerability with ourselves and to ourselves, and just our that interpersonal relationship? How does vulnerability exist there?
Well, it's about being honest with ourselves and realizing when we perhaps don't have the answers, and then asking for help. And I got my whole desk full here with Post-it notes, and I just keep writing down when there's something that I feel or something I need to ask for help. I write it down, and then the next step, and this was part of my book, Taking Stock was step 1 in my book, and that's about writing things down, and then later on ask for help. So once I've written something down, I think, who would potentially have the answers for this? Who can I talk to about this? Who can I give a call now to have a conversation about that, or nudge? And that is what we're talking about here. It's about to really be honest with yourself. I have an issue here. Let's just get on with it and solve this, but let's not always do it by myself.
Nick, I'm writing this stuff down because you just broke that giant step into asking for help. I think that asking for help is a very large step and an obstacle that we sometimes have a tough time climbing. But you broke that down into smaller steps. Write down what's going on in your life, and then isolate that and say, okay, who can I ask about that, to learn more information about it, to ask for help if help is needed, or to get advice about that. I think that for me, breaking that down into that easy step, just writing down the issues, and then pairing that up with someone that you can talk to about that. I think that's a revelation for me. Thank you.
And Nick, I'm going to put you on hold for a second, because this is between Scott and I guess. And maybe if it's not finding the biggest step, but maybe practicing and leaning in, and maybe finding a small problem and kind of work through it and have the courage to ask that successfully, not feeling real vulnerable because it was an easy problem to solve, but ease into it. you probably have a big step that you probably want to accomplish and solve, but it's not time. It's your easy steps that you talked about, Scott. I'm going to talk about something easy and get help with that and see that that's successful. Give me confidence to ask towards the bigger problem that I want. So I think, your steps is a good solution. Nick, I'm sorry. You can go ahead and and give us wisdom.
You're now allowed to talk,
Yeah.
Nick.
Yes. All right. Yeah. So what happened back then in 2018 when I had my patch? I mentioned before that I went and enjoyed myself in the bar until it became a problem. And I then came into recovery. And actually the first thing I was asked in recovery was this taking stock. I was given a sponsor, someone who's had some problems before, and that person guided me. And I got a homework, which took me a few weeks, to basically list down all the issues I had. And that was really taking a stock. And basically, he told me something like this. If you were a store owner, you would do an audit once a week, once a quarter, at least once a year. What's your stock take? But how often do we do this as human beings, that we actually write down everything? Well, with all our issues or habits or bad addictions or whatever we have, to get that down on it and then take that list to talk to someone about it. So that's what I did there on taking stock. And once I cleared my whole past on this, I have to do this on a daily basis now. I'm trying to do it on an ongoing basis, but before I go to bed every night, I also have the post-it notes by my bed table. I have to do an inventory and think back over the day. Was it something today that I need help with? I write that down, and then I can go to bed and I sleep peacefully, because then I know the next day it will be there and I will then deal with it. So we are constantly every day clearing things, and sometimes you might not know exactly who you can ask for help for that one, but you have it written down, and you can call a person and asking them, who do you think I can talk to this about? I have this challenge.
As you wrote your book, did one chapter write itself? Do you have a favorite chapter that you would just love to write and love people to read?
Oh, that's a big question, Well, the first chapter in the intro is about my story. It's when I hit my rock bottom, which was something that was not easy to write, even harder to get it out there on Amazon, because I was thinking for the rest of my life, anyone who pick up that book and that read that chapter will know the darkest days of my life. And I was then really having issues with alcohol at that stage, and that for me to admit that to myself was hard. To admit that to a friend was something, but to admit that to the whole world was even harder. But that would be my favorite chapter, for the reason, Don, that someone who picks that up and read that, hopefully it will resonate with them, or maybe they know someone around them, a friend or a colleague who go through some difficult times, and maybe they can also then look out for them and try to help them so that they don't fall as low as what I did. So I think the opening chapter, the first chapter in my book, go to that one. And I want to say this as well, Don, because that is a chapter that I send to anyone who apply for a job in my company. I tell them before the interview, you can go on our website to look out about our business, but more importantly, if you're going to work with me, why don't you read this chapter? And two things will happen then. Either they will cancel the interview because it's just too much for them, or they will come into the interview and they read it and they be curious. And many times they actually read the whole book after they read it. And then we have a great interview. And most importantly, and I want to mention this, there was one gentleman 3 years ago who read it, and about 5 minutes into the job interview, he showed me a couple of scars on his body, and he said, I have tried to end my life twice. I had to, so he had 2 suicide attempts behind him, and and then he started to cry. I gave him a small hug. So that was what we started our conversation in a job interview about. Can you imagine the kind of work culture we have between us, the level of trust we have? He will not leave our company. He will go anywhere, and he will not be shy to come and tell me if he's not done well, if he has some personal problems, which he was just going through recently. I gave him my full support.
I hate to state the obvious, but if you're going to be a great leader, you have to show vulnerability if you want the people below you or that are working for you to show the vulnerability. It starts with you. And that's an old saying, but it's really true in the example you just shared with us.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be vulnerable first as humans, otherwise the people below us, or even in the family, we can take this to our children, will not come in and knock our door and say when they have some challenges, if we have not been humans first. We have to also tell them that we are going through difficult times and lead and guide them and show them this is how I solved it.
Wow. That's a good one too. That's a really good one.
Many times, well, every time, the part of what starts this podcast is Scott saying, we're going to talk to some people today and we're going to become better runners and maybe, just maybe, even better people. And at first I kind of rolled my eyes a bit, but I love Scott so much that I didn't roll him too hard or he didn't see it. But conversations like this make me proud of him having the courage and the vulnerability to say that, because I think some of this does resonate and it props us all up and allows us not only to become better runners, but to be better runners, we've got to be better people too. And I think it fits well. So hats off to you, Mr. War, for having vulnerability and the courage to say it. He froze. You see what happens? He didn't even hear he'll never hear that comment or that compliment. Ryan,
Sorry,
you've got to make sure he
I froze up. I heard the compliment and I appreciate it. Hey, Nick, I think one of the things that you just taught us, which I think is brilliant, is you went through a hard spell, and you were finally able to work through it. But I think more importantly is now you're making yourself available to be a person that can help someone else. So as someone else is making the Post-it notes of, I need to work on this, or I'm having a struggle with this, who do I talk to? The first person that pops in their mind is, I need to go and talk to Nick Jonsson, because I know he's been there, and I know that he's not going to make fun of me, and he's going to respect, he's not going to judge. So I think that that's really important for all of us to remember, that not only look to others and as possible mentors or coaches, but be available to others to help them through their hard times, to be their coach. And I think that you just taught that lesson to me. So thank you for that.
Yes, and Scott, that's actually the last chapter of my book is about finding your purpose, and that's what I'm doing now, and it's about giving it back. And in the recovery world, there's a saying, you got to give back the gift to keep it. And what that means that the people in the recovery world, they gave me this gift and they showed me the way. They gave me the courage and they tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we've been there before. We also went through some difficult times. I'm now okay and I'm here to hold your hand. That's what my sponsor did when he went through me and helping me to do my personal inventory check, taking the stock. Now I do that. So I have a workout this morning, which I'm looking forward to. And after that, I'm going to a recovery meeting where I will be for the newcomers, people who are going through difficult times now, to give them that courage and support that, hey, it's not that bad. We all go through the ups and downs of life. Let's just go through this together.
So I'm going to ask this final question to you, Nick. These lessons that you learned, and there's many different schools and places to learn lessons. Part of it was through business and personal relationships, and out in your performance. How did all of these classrooms make you a better athlete? Did it change you? Did you become different, train different, feel different, execute different?
Great
yes,
question.
It has definitely changed me, and I realize how important it is with the social connection. And with that, I mean being my true self and not being scared or shy to be myself. So what I've done is, rather than enjoying all these sports by myself and seeing it as an escape because I'm chasing the endorphins or whatever it is and I want to be in a good shape, I now make sure I include myself. And with that, I'm trying to do as much social things I do. So I spend a lot of time in Thailand in an Ironman training camp where athletes come from all over the world. And that's where I am right now. That's where I'm going to train today. So then I'm training in a group. So we are in swim academies, which means that we have people to talk to before and after the trainings at least. And then we are cycling groups together and we do runs, we do intervals, sprints, but we also go trail running. We do all kind of runs in a group. I need to force myself to put myself inside those situations to be fully surrounded by people, and be my true self. And now I'm also helping the young athletes here, some of them who are the best performing in triathlon sport in Asia, the young ones, and I'm coaching them how to build a plan B career for themselves so the day they retire from professional sport, that they have some other skills and so on. And that's also a part of what I'm doing now and giving back to the sport.
Wow, that's a wonderful mission.
Yeah, boy, that's really good. The book is called oops, I just lost it. Here it is. The book is called
there it is.
Loneliness: The 5 Pathways to Overcoming Isolation, Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in the Modern Business World. Don't think that this book is just about business. It's written by a very top performing endurance athlete, Nick Jonsson, who we've just talked to. Look at it as a well-rounded. You need to pick this up so that you don't make the mistakes that many of us have and many of us will make. But try to, after you make those mistakes, make them quickly, make them forward, and then, as you're making them, fall forward and then get past it and make it a learning opportunity as quickly as you can, rather than wallowing in it. So Nick Jonsson can also be found at nickjonsson.com. Jonsson is spelled a little bit differently, maybe not in Sweden, but here in the United States, Jonsson is JONSSON.com. And you can also find him on LinkedIn. We will include those links in the podcast show notes.
Thank you, Nick Jonsson, for coming and sharing your story with us. And I'm sure you've touched someone out there, and just that, even if it's just one, will make a big, big difference. And I know that's for certain.
So go out and run and be vulnerable.
Mas.
Thank you very much.